Hey guys, so before I start I have to kind of explain why I titled this the way I did, and I gotta tell you, it is not clickbait, and it has to do with actual military terminology, and I'll get to it in a second. It's just absolutely wild because I had to do a double take when I heard about this. Now, the reason we know about this is because, well, there was a shooting the other day that a lot of people have talked about, and a lot of information came out about it that hasn't been widespread. So I'm trying to get the word out to at least a few individuals on exactly what happened. But if you're not aware, there was an incident a few days ago where there were Border Patrol, not ICE agents, but Border Patrol, who were working, and they got confronted by a bunch of activists. Now, one of the activists got too close to the scene, and she got apprehended by Border Patrol. And this guy named Alex Pretti, which I gotta appreciate the parents real quick. And this is, I'm not joking when I say this, by the way, because this is an actual pet peeve of mine. His middle name, Jeffrey, is spelled correctly, and I really appreciate that. Again, not making a joke, it is actually just literally a pet peeve every time I see Jeffrey spelled wrong, because people will spell it E-R-Y, where it's Jeff-ery, and they will say Jeffrey, even though that's not that name. I mean, if you have someone named Jeff-ery, and you spell it E-R-Y, that's fine. But people will say Jeffrey, and then they'll spell it E-R-Y, and it's just, again, just a pet peeve of mine. So I appreciate the parents actually naming him correctly with the R-E-Y instead. But unfortunately, this guy decided that he should start directing traffic, which, again, when law enforcement is doing their job, and this is Border Patrol, not ICE, this is Border Patrol, who were being protested for some reason, even though Border Patrol, isn't going after illegal immigrants that are already inside the United States. They're like backup to ICE, but the actual ICE agents themselves go after the illegal immigrants. Border Patrol only deals with the border and maybe a few security measures here or there. Like, they can set up a border around an area, which is just a cordon, basically, and they won't let anybody into that area. So, you had a bunch of protesters who are supposed to be protesting ICE, who are actually protesting the Border Patrol, who were keeping people out of an area. So, when you get up in their face and you get up into the area where they're supposed to be keeping people out, they get a little bit touchy about that. So, this guy, Alex Pretti, decides that he's going to start directing traffic, which isn't his job. He's just a civilian. Border Patrol was supposed to handle, the actual, traffic coming through the area. Well, some woman decided to come up to the cordon, and they tell her, get away, get back, you're not supposed to be here. She doesn't listen, so they, tackle her to the ground, basically, because they don't know who this person is. You're in a restricted area. You're not supposed to be here. Like, we've told you several times that you're not allowed to be here, and you keep coming up to us. We don't know what you're doing. We don't know who you are. We don't know what you're doing here or what your plans are. Get back. And she kept coming forward. So, this guy, Alex Pretti, was told by his parents that, hey, if you're going to protest, fine. We know you're upset about everything going on, But if you're going to go armed, do not interfere with law enforcement. Because as soon as you're armed, things could escalate once they notice that you're armed. Now, Minnesota has several gun laws that a lot of 2A purists would not be happy about. And for me personally, I don't agree with them either. But they have laws inside Minnesota that says that you're allowed to conceal carry. But if you do, you have to have a concealed carry license. And if you are concealing and carrying, then you have to have your ID and your concealed carry license on you. Well, it just so turns out that Alex was illegally carrying his firearm by Minnesota law. He had a concealed weapon, but he didn't have his ID or his concealed carry license on him. So he was illegally carrying the weapon, which Democrats would care about if he had, shot a civilian in self-defense. If, someone had tackled him and he, used his Second Amendment rights to defend himself, and then they found out later that he didn't have his concealed carry license on him, he would have been arrested, charged, and probably convicted and thrown in jail, even if it was lawful self-defense, because he wasn't following the law. If this was a right-winger, if this guy was on the right, and he defended himself, he would have gone to jail because he didn't have his ID on him. Which, again, Second Amendment purists would not be happy about this. And honestly, I wouldn't be happy about it either. I would be defending this guy up and down all over the place. Because that is BS, that he has to have his concealed carry license on him. But it is strange that he didn't have his ID on him. I always carry an ID on me. Hell, usually I have my military ID on me as well. By the way, I do have to say this now for the rest of the video. Nothing I say reflects the DOD, the Department of the Navy, or the Marine Corps. Okay, because this is going to be relevant later on, and I'll make it clear and also justify the title. So, he decides, Alex, sees this woman get detained. Well, he decides to interfere with law enforcement and fight a cop, basically. And again, this isn't ICE. This is Border Patrol. So he decides to fight Border Patrol, despite the fact that they're supposed to be protesting ICE. Again, I don't know what the hell these people are thinking. It doesn't make any sense. Why are you going after Border Patrol in this scenario? But again, I'm being kind of obtuse here because yes, they are helping ICE, but they're not the ones detaining illegal immigrants as far as I'm aware. That's ICE's job. Border Patrol is just supposed to keep people out of the area. Again, I'm being slightly obtuse here and slightly nitpicky, but it's just weird to me that they don't make that differential when they're talking about this situation. Anyways, he decides to fight a cop. He gets tackled to the ground by a few officers. And this all happens within 3 seconds. One of the officers screams, "Gun, gun, gun," because the guy has a gun and he hasn't told anyone that he has a gun. When you interact with law enforcement and you have some kind of altercation going on, you're supposed to inform the officer that, hey, I got a gun here, it's off to the side, it's right here, my hands are up, whatever. Well, he didn't tell the officer. He got too close to the officer. Then he started to fight an officer. He gets tackled to the ground. One of the officers realizes, oh God, he's got a gun, starts screaming, "Gun, gun, gun," which, by the way, his parents told him not to do any of this because of how stupid it would be to do this. And apparently he agreed, saying that, "Oh, no worries, I won't do that. I won't get into a fight with a cop." And as he proceeds to get into a fight with a cop, one of the officers disarms him. He seems to reach for his holster because either he's like, oh, my gun just disappeared off my hip, or maybe he's reaching for a gun. Another officer, having no idea what's going on besides that this guy's got a gun, sees him reach for the holster. He pulls his gun, and then he fires on the guy. And then as soon as he fires, a bunch of other officers are like, oh God, shots fired. They pull their guns, and they start firing too. Because, duh, that's what they're trained to do. One officer yelled, he's got a gun. Another officer pulls his gun and takes care of what he perceives to be a threat. And another officer, who also is not aware that this guy has been disarmed, pulls his gun as well and also engages the target. Now, again, it doesn't matter that 6 guys got this guy manhandled, because his arm is free and apparently reaching for the holster. They could have 20 guys on top of this dude, and as long as he's got that arm free, able to reach for a gun, that's a dangerous situation for everyone in the dog pile. And again, all this happens within 3 seconds. So it's called a lawful shooting, but an awful one, because he was already disarmed, but someone yelled he got a gun. They disarm him. One of the officers doesn't realize that within the 0.7 seconds it took him to pull his weapon and point at the guy, that the guy is already disarmed, and he starts firing because he got a gun, and this dude's assaulting cops, and there's like 20 people around blowing whistles, and they can't hear what's going on. So they take care of the threat, the perceived threat, and then they start asking, where's the gun? Does he still got the gun? Because they don't know what's going on, because everyone's blowing whistles like a bunch of idiots, and they can't hear what's going on, and a bunch of shots just got fired. Probably half the people in the area are now completely deaf from all the gunshots going on. And they're like, yeah, we disarmed the guy, but we didn't know. I'm sorry, you guys didn't realize that he had been disarmed. Well, as it turns out, this got a lot of people in trouble, because this guy was in a signal chat. Now, signal is used by the military as well as elected officials, because signal is very difficult, if not impossible, to hack. Now, nothing's impossible, obviously. If you get invited to a signal chat, obviously, you can look at all the chat logs in there. But signal is encrypted, so it's used by law enforcement, it's used by the military, and it's used by elected government officials, as well as civilian contractors, probably, because it's relatively secure. Well, this guy was in a signal chat, and that signal chat was run by Minnesota elected officials, which included, if I remember correctly, his name is Alex Falconer, and he is a state house elected official. So he's a representative of some district to the state house, and he runs the group. And he realized, oh God, one of the guys in our signal chat just got into a fight with officers, and shots were fired, and now the guy is not here anymore. So he admits that he's running this signal chat, which basically, it doesn't dox ICE agents, as far as I'm aware, but it gives ICE agents, here's the vehicle, takes pictures of vehicles, they send out pictures of vehicles with the license plate, saying that these are confirmed ICE vehicles, whether they're rentals or whether they're actual government vehicles, and then they have vehicles in there that might be ICE agents. They're not confirmed to be ICE agents, Which means they might have people going after civilians who might not be, who are probably not part of ICE. So if someone sees this vehicle and it's like, oh, well, this guy has a vehicle that we think belongs to an ICE agent, we should start harassing them and like terrorizing them. And it turns out just to be a random civilian. Well, that's a bad look for Mr. Alex Falconer. But it also turns out that the admin who runs this signal chat is Peggy Flanagan, the Democrat lieutenant governor, who is running an anti-ICE signal chat with other elected officials to basically warn people that ICE is in the local neighborhood and to send protesters, armed protesters, to the location. Why? Why are there armed protesters in a government signal chat with government elected officials, and these people are being sent to protests with firearms, and these idiots are then attacking Border Patrol? So Alex Falconer realizes that this is a terrible look. So he has to admit that we have this signal group, but we're not encouraging armed civilians to attack Border Patrol. Please don't arrest us. Which is not what he said, but basically what he heavily implied. And it's being run by the lieutenant governor, the person who got elected alongside Tim Walz. I'm not sure if they do like lieutenant governor elections separately, or if the lieutenant governor is appointed, or if they get elected alongside the governor. I'm not sure exactly how it works in Minnesota, because there's 3 different ways it can work. The lieutenant governor is elected separately, elected with the governor, or the lieutenant governor is appointed by the governor. I believe it's an elected position in Minnesota, but I'm not sure. I know how it works in Virginia, but that's different. So, you have the lieutenant governor and state representatives in this signal group sending protesters who turned out to be armed to mess with ICE, and they ended up messing with Border Patrol instead, and one of their protesters attacked a Border Patrol agent while he was armed with a firearm, and he was illegally carrying the weapon according to Minnesota law because he didn't have his ID and his concealed carry license on him. Oh, and it turns out, by the way, that they use salute reports in the signal chat. Now, the reason why I had to mention, and why the title here is not clickbait, and why I had to mention I'm in the military, is because a salute report is a Marine Corps enemy report for enemy contact. Salute is an acronym, which means size, activity, location, unit, which unit in this case means like, oh, it's a Russian unit, or it's a paramilitary like Muslim group, or it's a terrorist organization, or if it's a in this case it would be ICE or Border Patrol. And then it's time, I think, yeah, time, and then what kind of equipment they have. It's an actual military acronym used by the Marine Corps to identify enemy units. I'm not sure if this signal chat is meant to be a pseudo-military or a paramilitary organization. But the fact that they're using a salute report to identify ICE agents, which a salute report by definition refers to enemy activity, enemy military activity. This is an incredibly bad look for the Democrats, which is why they're doing everything in their power to make this about the Second Amendment, which, again, it has nothing to do with the Second Amendment, because you're not allowed to assault federal agents of any kind, at any point, for any reason. If federal agents do anything unlawful, you report it. You report it to either local police or the FBI, or for an interior investigation. There are organizations which are set up in the government whose entire job is rooting out corruption within federal law enforcement. This is not one of those, we investigated ourselves and found we did nothing wrong. No, these organizations are set up specifically to investigate other government organizations to root out corruption and abuse of power. And they go through the judicial system. Like, they go through the judicial system. You do not assault federal officers, especially when you're armed. Especially if you haven't informed those officers that you're armed, which, by the way, if you inform an officer that you're armed and then assault them, that still designates you as a threat. And they can deal with the threat in the manner in which they deem necessary. And again, lawful but awful. Because in this case, it was a lawful shooting, but it happened when an officer did not realize that the perpetrator had already been disarmed. But the fact that they're using signal chats and inviting seemingly random civilians into this signal chat, and this signal chat is being run by elected government officials, and they're using military acronyms for identifying enemy units in the signal chat, is a bad look. It is a very bad look. I think that this is actually going to... A lot of people are not even going to realize the significance of this. And I really have to point it out. Because this... In a sane world, basically everyone involved with that signal chat would be arrested. Because they're referring to ICE, federal law enforcement, as enemy combatants. Because of the nature of what a salute report is. Very bad for Minnesota Democrats, which is why they're trying to scream and shout. And this is also probably why Tim Walz at first came out to try yet again to scare Donald Trump into pulling out ICE agents, and then immediately turned around and then realized that, oh God, they found out about our possible paramilitary group running a signal chat. And one of our guys just attacked a federal officer while carrying a firearm. And they're using salute reports. Dear Lord, dude. That's probably why Tim Walz caved immediately upon that information coming to light, because everyone is now trying to cover their asses, because they're absolutely terrified at this point. For good reason, by the way. For very good reason, they're terrified, because they had to admit that this group exists. That is very bad. Very, very bad juju. Very bad juju. This is very bad for everyone involved. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there because this is going to turn into a whole situation. And that's all I got to say about it. Holy dear Lord. Bye, guys.